Welcome to this 18th lesson now in this series of videos on Jekyll and Hyde. I hope you're all doing well and looking forward to half term. I know I am. So, Victorian Repression and Morality is what we're doing today. So in this lesson, you will learn about the themes of repression and morality in the novel, especially as seen through the theories of Sigmund Freud and Michel Foucault. So let's get started with some context. So Sigmund Freud was a leading thinker of the Victorian period, which spanned the reign of Queen Victoria from 1837 to 1901. Freud was the pioneering voice of psychoanalysis, which is the study of the unconscious mind. Believing that childhood traumas triggered adult neurosis, Freud studied his patients' dreams. Tapping into the narratives of the unconscious could help treat his patients. So any of you who are interested in maybe doing psychology at A-level, this is a figure who you should be familiar with. Okay. So Freud believed that we repress traumas, meaning that we bury them in our unconscious. These traumas do not stay hidden, however. They affect our daily lives and the way that we think and interact with other people. Freud used psychoanalysis to explore these repressions. If traumas were unearthed, then they could be understood and mitigated. There's some notes for you. This is Freud. Okay, let's move on to Victorian repression. So we have an idea today of Victorian society as defined by repression. Men wore high collars, women wore large, cumbersome dresses, and no one talked about sexuality. Whether they were in a polite society or not. So this idea of a rigid society has a lot to do with misreadings of Freud's theories on repression. We think of Victorians as fundamentally repressed, especially when compared to our free and open society. As Michel Foucault demonstrates, however, the exact opposite is probably true. So let's have a look at Foucault then. So Michel Foucault, a 20th century theorist, established what he called the repressive hypothesis. He argues that the Victorians developed a network of entities that created a discourse of sexuality. That means talking about sexuality. Hospitals, madhouses, and psychiatric rooms, among others, were developed during the 19th century to be spaces to discuss, analyse, dissect, and treat sexuality. The Victorians, in other words, talked about sex constantly. They just did so in private institutions that specialised in such dialogue. So Jekyll and Hyde focuses on the connections between polite society and the neurotic behaviours caused by earlier trauma. Jekyll is outwardly a respectable doctor, but he is ravaged inside by a monster. The serum, in some sense, reveals what he has repressed, making private desires into dangerous public acts. Jekyll develops the serum to transform himself into another person so that he can live his desires with anonymity. In other words, in the form of Hyde, Jekyll can be a violent, deviant person, and who knows what else. One could read Jekyll and Hyde as a text that criticises any form of social repression. Since Jekyll cannot practice his desires in polite society, he creates a monster that has no self-discipline. Social graces keep Jekyll from living his life, but his attempt to escape causes disaster. One could also read the text through Freud's theories of the unconscious. Hyde might embody the traumas that Jekyll has repressed. Okay, so, in summary, Jekyll and Hyde is a preeminent Gothic text written during the Victorian period. In the late 19th century, Sigmund Freud founded psychoanalysis and developed his theories of the unconscious and traumatic repression. This in part led to 20th and 21st century society to think of the Victorians as a rigid and repressed people. Michel Foucault theorised otherwise, demonstrating that the Victorians created disciplines to talk about sex. Jekyll and Hyde explores these elements of repression through the disastrous transformation of his characters. Okay, so that's our last lesson then before half term, which is awesome. So very well done for getting through. Next half term, we're going to be doing some more comprehension and writing activities to go with these notes. But for the time being, we're going to have a quiz tomorrow to sum up the half term. And as an extension for today, please find some quotations to show this repression in either Victorian society or in the text itself. Okay, so thanks for listening, and again, well done.